George Elek here from Not the Top 20 with our latest video for DragonSports, and this time we are focusing on the ongoing search for the new Cardiff City manager. Since Cardiff's relegation to League One was confirmed, there hasn't been much speculation around who's up for the job apart from chatting between fans as to who they would want. But since we last did a video on this subject for DragonSports, I put forward Des Buckingham, the former Oxford manager, as my choice, and he's now bookmaker favourite to get the job. So seemingly there might be something in it. I have no doubt that Buckingham would want the job, and the fact that he's speaking, or the fact that he's favourite for the job, suggests that maybe he is speaking to them, and I maintain that he would be a very shrewd appointment. One name that has been linked with a couple of reports suggesting that Michael Beale could be an unlikely candidate for the job. You know, with Beale, he's someone who not that long ago was one of the most promising, or seen to be one of the most promising head coaches and coaches in the country, and then since his job at Sunderland has become a manager that's kind of been written off. And I think often we can be too quick to write off managers as good or bad depending on their last job or not too much evidence. And if we look at Beale, I think there's enough promise there to mean that it makes some sense to at least speak to him or consider him for the job, because he was a massive part of, or maybe the most important part of, the promising start to Steven Gerrard's management career. You know, Gerrard had him as his assistant at Rangers during a very successful time, and then took him with him to Aston Villa, where the job that Gerrard did at the start of his reign at Villa started very, very well and had people very excited. Beale then moved to QPR as their head coach, and Villa's form dropped off. So some reason there that you might think that Beale played quite a big part in Gerrard's early success, and especially when you consider the way that his managerial career has gone since, it suggests that he certainly was a very important assistant manager. And at QPR, Beale's career started very well as a head coach. You know, he oversaw a really good period where QPR were up towards the top of the table, even top at 1.2, and he was being linked to a Premier League job in the Wolves job too. So, you know, he was very promising at that time. He then decided to move on to Rangers on his own, and that did not work out. And then he got the Sunderland job, and that was his previous post, and it's clear to see that was pretty disastrous. And often, you know, when you have a manager who puts in, one disastrous job, that can be the end of their career. But take coming in at Sunderland when he did, when the fan base were not particularly happy with the decision to part company with Tony Mowbray, with a recruitment process that was long and arduous and clearly kind of bungled in the way that it came about. It doesn't feel like Beale was the preferred candidate when the decision was made to sack Mowbray. You know, he came into a club maybe on a bit of a hiding to nothing. You know, after Beale left, Mike Dodds came in, who's now manager of Wycombe, and he couldn't oversee any improvement too. So the kind of finger is squarely pointed at Beale, and maybe rightly so, but I don't think we can write off a young manager's career coming in halfway through the season in a difficult circumstance and not improving a side. And he was also just incredibly unpopular with the fan base too. I think maybe he's got to learn, or should have learned from that. He has to maybe play the media a bit better, play the fans a bit better, try and create an environment that's conducive to winning games of football. But he did that at QPR. You know, before he decided to move on, he was, he signed a new contract with the club. He spoke about his willingness to create something there, and then was deemed to be, a bit of a turncoat when he decided to move on. I think surely in his experiences so far, Beale has learned what he's got to do in order to change the atmosphere. And I'm sure that if he got this opportunity at Cardiff, he would know that it's his last kind of opportunity at this level of a club without some success. So I'm by no means saying I think it's the right man or that he's the right man, but I can understand why Cardiff would want to speak to somebody who not that long ago showed serious promise. The one manager I think has to be looked at is Rubén Sellés, who reports suggest he is soon to be sacked from Hull. Now, he did an incredible job at Reading. You probably wouldn't find many managers in the whole of the country who did a better job than Rubén Sellés at Reading, coming into a side with a points deduction in League One, who couldn't sign any players for much of it, had to bring through young players from the academy who probably weren't ready for first team football. He delivered safety after that points deduction, and then had them on the brink of the playoffs in League One in really trying circumstances before he moved on to take his chance at Hull, where he took over a side in the relegation zone, and even though it was close, delivered them to safety. He's bright, he plays a really aggressive out of possession style of football, and there's no way Hull City should be looking to move on, and they should have learned that from their mistake last year with Liam Rosenior. Now, Sellés will probably have his admirers in the Championship and abroad too, but in my mind he's probably best suited to going to a club like Cardiff with a decent budget, who are looking to deliver promotion, rather than going back into another club where it's saving relegation, it's firefighting. I'd be amazed if the hierarchy at Cardiff aren't looking at Sellés. I think he looks like the outstanding candidate for so many jobs that are open right now. It might be ambitious, it might be difficult, but they have to consider him.